Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from Oslo, Norway, Dr. Anthony Giannoumis. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ash. It's such a joy and pleasure to be here. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to your audience. This is so cool.
Thank you so much. Dr. Giannoumis is the co-founder and chairman of Inclusive Creation. He's a motivational speaker on inclusive leadership. He co-created the inclusion game and the mind behind the 4 fundamental principles of universal design. He's an author of 50 scientific articles and the founder of the Equals EU Network for Gender Inclusive Innovation, which represents over 24 countries. So, Anthony, with such an amazing career, tell me about your own journey in brief.
Sure. So I think I began my journey as a complete skeptic. So I was living in the United States at the time. I just finished my master's degree, and it's that pivotal point in your life where you don't know what direction you're going to go to. I see this job ad come up in Oslo to investigate, do research as a qualified researcher in inclusive design. And I was completely shut off to it. I just said, oh, this is something very global north. I'm not interested in that. I was really into maternal health and indigenous health and these issues that affected the global south. Well, I end up applying for the position at the encouragement of my friends and family and ended up getting the offer, moved to Oslo, suddenly discovered that inclusive design is about more than just global north issues. And one of my students actually called me out and said, hey, if you want this issue to take root in the global south, then you need to take that action. So I partnered up with another student of mine, a man named George Manique, who's based in Maputo, Mozambique. And he just cleared the way for me to start doing research in a new environment where inclusive design had rarely, if ever, achieved any breakthrough. So we were able to establish that first layer of evidence, and that kind of catapulted my career into where it is today. Amazing. A few weeks ago, I was at an International Telecommunications Union, a UN agency meeting, and there was a delegate from Mozambique who was talking about the next generation of the work that we had started so many years ago that's being done today in Mozambique. And it just made my heart so fulfilled and gave me so much meaning.
Incredible. And what inspired you to transform from a career in computer programming and opera singing to becoming an advocate for inclusive leadership?
Yeah, it's been a strangled route to get where I'm going. And I think one of the main lessons I learned was just to follow my intention. And I don't mean just my motivation, but my point of interest. So the things that are making me want to discover, things that are making me want to look inside and look outside and ask questions. And so that journey started as in a business degree. And so it was just this general business degree. I ended up going into work for a finance company doing computer programming. And I suddenly got to the point where every morning I'm waking up, I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm feeling less and less me. I'm feeling less and less whole. And I find this really amazing program doing development work, international development work in Peru. And so I signed up for the program and I moved to Peru for a few weeks, and I got to work with a boarding school for low-income families. So they send their children to the boarding school, students learn, and I was just there to kind of help clean up around the school, paint some furniture and things, and just talk to the students and get some language exchange, some cultural exchange going. Well, that experience was absolutely pivotal. And I realized that all the things I had been doing up to that point had been very self-serving. And I knew I needed to do something, not to give back, but to do something that's more external, that's more looking at the other parts of society and the world that have needs. And so that drove me into doing a master's degree in public health, where I started a research career. And lately I've been pivoting in a number of other directions. And I just started this year stand-up comedy, believe it or not. Yes. So it's been very, very exciting to see some of the threads of my career start to come together now. Because as a motivational speaker, you need stagecraft. You need storytelling, you need creativity. As an academic, you need critical thinking. And so I bring all this together in my motivational speaking to really bring the science of inclusion to life.
Wow. So now let's talk a little bit about inclusive leadership and inclusive creation. Let me start by asking you a question I'm sure you've been asked many times. How do you define inclusive leadership?
Can I tell you a story that I think
Yes,
encapsulates
please.
it very well?
Yes.
So I was teaching a class not too long ago, and I invited my students to give me feedback after the class was done. Well, this young woman comes from the back of the auditorium, marching down like she was on a mission. And she says, Anthony, I have a list of all the things you did wrong today. And so my mind is blown and my ego is hurt. So I asked her to come back to my office, and she's just rattling through this list. And I'm just in a daze. The only thing that broke my concentration was the tram outside of my office honked at a car, and it just snapped me out. And I'm looking at the student, I'm realizing this is no ordinary student. This is a revolutionary. She sees it as her mission to speak truth to power. And she sees it as her mission because she doesn't see that anybody else would do that. And so in that realization, I gained a lot of respect for her. And I tried to take a step back and think more critically about my reaction, because of course, my gut reaction is just to push back. No, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just a student. I'm a professor. I'm a leader in this field. How could you possibly be giving me criticism? Instead, I took a step back and I started thinking about what she was actually saying. And there are a lot of the things she was saying was right. It was spot on. And even more so, I didn't know why she was right. I needed to dig deeper to understand more about her experience in order to understand how I could be not just a better teacher, but a better leader. So that's the number one thing I think for leadership, and especially inclusive leadership, that we as leaders just need to shut up so that the others, the ones who are offering feedback, the ones who are offering insights, the most innovative thinkers in our team, so that they don't shut down. So we have to shut up so they don't shut down.
Amazing. And Anthony, based on all the work that you've been doing, what are some common challenges leaders face in creating truly inclusive environments?
It's such a good question. I think this is one of those questions that we're going to be puzzling over for generations, only because the idea of inclusion continues to shift and evolve. But I'll give you another story that I had experienced recently. So I'm sitting in my office one day, and a notification comes up on my computer from an email address, from a UN.org email address. And so I'm thrilled. Who at the UN is emailing me? And I look, and it's an invitation to this high-level, expert-level hackathon focused on health and health technology. So now I'm thrilled. This is a chance for me as an academic to bring together people, bring together a team, and really try to do something great. So I go to my boss, I ask her for funding, and I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to put together a superhero team. We're going to be like something out of the comic books, just everybody's kind of got their own job. I was like, I know my colleague down the hall, he's Dr. John. He is an expert level engineer. And then my other colleague in the building across the way, Dr. Samuel, he's got health tech just under his thumb. He's been working in this field for years. And then Dr. William, he's one of these emeritus professors that's been in the field forever, knows everything that's been happening in the last few decades. So those were going to be my team. But my boss says, you know what? The condition of your funding is you bring 3 of your students. Oh, wow. She said, actually, I know exactly who you should be bringing. She says, Diane is a student here from Norway. She's first semester computer software engineer. She says, Dominica is a student from Russia. She just moved to Oslo the last couple of years, and she's studying product design. And then she said, there's another student that just moved last week from Guinea, a woman named Dembe, and she's studying design as well. She said, you need to take these 3 students. And so now I'm just like quaking in my boots, just figured this is going to be a waste of time. How on earth are we possibly going to compete with these, bachelor's level students? Well, we get to Geneva, we get into the UN headquarters, and we're looking around the room, and there are teams from MIT, there are teams from elite universities in China and India and all across Europe, and we got nothing. We got just a random idea that we came up with. It was just a storytelling app. There wasn't a lot to it. And these other teams were coming up with these like machine learning, artificial intelligence. We're going to predict the next COVID-19 kind of technologies. Well, we're all pitching the second day, and they're pitching, and the jury's listening and maybe asking a few questions. And then my team gets up. Now, my job as their mentor, as their kind of leader, was just to operate the PowerPoint presentation. All I had to do was click the button on the computer. Their job was to do the pitching. And they'd start talking about their experiences as women in this male-dominated field. And the jury starts looking at them and trying to understand more about what they're doing, what this storytelling app is all about. And the emotions of the jury members and the presenters, my students, start to just get higher and higher. And I could see that we were onto something when one of the jury members literally started tearing up in her eyes and actually shed a tear. So I said, oh boy, we might actually have a chance of pulling something off. Well, not only did we win first prize, I went back 3 years later and won first prize at the next hackathon they had on education with an entirely different group of students. And this is when I realized the lesson here is that if I had just brought Dr. William, Dr. John, and Dr. Samuel, we would have just come up with another overcomplicated thing. We would have been patting each other on the back. Oh, good idea, good idea, good idea. And that would have been it. But because I brought these three women, these three people with very different ideas, people who felt the safety to challenge each other, to call each other out when they thought, oh, we're not kind of going in the right direction. That's why we won. That's why we won twice. And it's because we need to look at our teams, not just as who's going to be a good fit. Dr. William, Dr. Sam, and Dr. John was a good fit. They were a good fit for the team. They were qualified. But we need to think beyond just a good fit and who's a good addition, who's bringing a new perspective that can challenge the team to move forward.
What an amazing story. Thank you for sharing this. Anthony, my next question is, when I was preparing to have my conversation with you, I was fascinated with what you refer to as the sins and wins approach to inclusivity. And tell me, how does it impact leadership styles?
Sure. So this is my one-of-a-kind bespoke methodology built on literally hundreds of interviews that I've collected with leaders in government and industry, startups, finance sector, nonprofit and civil society. And through this data, through this synthesis over the last 15 years, I've come up with these 7 sins and wins. And all they are very simple lessons, kind of like the ones I've already been talking about, you know, shut up so they don't shut down, who's a good fit and a good ad, simple lessons that people can take away and can use as a source of inspiration, can use as a source of like setting the fire or turning the key in the ignition of your vehicle to start that journey, because we got a lot of evidence out there. We know what it is to be inclusive, what it is to create inclusive cultures. What we don't have enough of is that inspiration to begin that journey. And so what I get to do with the sins and wins, and I get to do with my keynote speaking, is help companies light that fire so that they have the ambition to take these sorts of lessons forward and think more critically about what they're doing day to day in their companies and in their organizations.
Amazing. My next question is that how does reverse mentoring work, and why is it important for modern leaders?
Can I tell you a really quick story on this one?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So there I am in Maputo, Mozambique. First time ever, they're ready to collect data on this new idea of inclusive design in Mozambique. And I'm in line to get my passport stamped. And I had forgotten to get cash to pay for the visa. And I'm looking at the sign and I'm feeling in my wallet and I know immediately I do not have this money. So I get to the front of the queue finally and I explain to the security guard, the customs agent, who's outfitted in one of those khaki uniforms, you know, with the Mozambique flag on the side of her arm. And I explain, you know, in kind of English, and she's trying to explain back in Portuguese that, you know, I don't have this cash. Is there a cash machine somewhere in the airport? And she just kind of shrugs and points past security, past the exit of the airport, all the way outside of the airport. And so now I'm like lost. Do you want me to go out and then come back in? And she was just basically, yeah, you do your thing. I go out, nothing's working. And so I needed to be rescued. And I called up one of my students. Now, this is a student that I supervised his master's degree. And he was one who was kind of hosting me there in Maputo. And he came to my rescue. He came in, brought the money, was able to pay for the visa. And we spent the whole week with his contacts, his network, doing interviews with people across the country to collect this data. And as we were doing this, our relationship started to change. It
Mm.
went from me advising him, me giving him support, to him giving me support and advising him. So I thought I would test the waters. So I started asking him, where do you think I should go with my career? What do you think I should be doing next? Do you think I'm doing the right thing by doing X versus Y? And he started advising me. He gave me all the cliched mentor advice, right? Do what you're doing, follow your passion, you know, it's going to be okay. You're going to get there. And I realized how much value can come when we think differently about the mentor-mentee relationship. When we start inverting that and we start thinking more about how someone who's junior can provide way different perspectives and can avoid what's called the expertise trap, that's when the real magic can happen in mentorship. So this is something I've been advocating for. It gives you a 360-degree view of your work.
What a great response. Thank you. My next question, Anthony, is about your 4 fundamental principles of universal design. How do these apply in everyday leadership scenarios?
Sure. So, of course, I have another story for you, if you'll
Please
allow me.
Storytelling is the best way to communicate your thoughts.
I think so too. Now, my mom is one of these amazing human beings. She comes from the southern part of the United States, so she prides herself on her politeness, on her gentility, on her manners, and all these sorts of things. Now, she loves me and my brother, loves us to the end of the earth, but she really loves her grandchildren. And so it was a red letter day. It was a special day in her life that she got to be in the hospital the day her grandson was born. And of course, what she wants to do is commemorate that moment. Even though we were all tired and, you know, completely strung out, she wanted to get that on camera. So she asked the nurse, can you take this picture with my iPhone? Nurse says, fine. It comes out beautifully. So now she's on a mission. She wants to go get a printer, take it back home and print out this picture. Well, she gets her new printer out of the box, you know, that squeaky styrofoam, and it's that smell of the new plastic. She plugs it all in, and immediately there's all these windows just start popping up, right? Download these templates. Is your antivirus updated? Here's an install window for the printer. So she's trying to navigate everything, and she's getting more and more agitated, more and more confused, more and more frustrated. Now, what most parents do in this circumstance, they ring up their children. They say, hey, son or daughter, can you please help me? I don't know how to get this. So my brother's now trying to help her navigate through these windows. And even he, who I call him my mom's IT mentor, he's the one who says, is it plugged in? Have you turned it off and on again? Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry. And even he is stumped. So she finally gets so frustrated and angry with this process that she picks the printer up over her head and slams it against the wall. Now, technology, any product or service we use should never drive us to that point of frustration. It just shouldn't happen. And it's easy for us to blame the printer, right? We want to say that the printer is just not well designed. It's just not usable. It's not intuitive. That's the one I always hear from everyone. It just needs to be intuitive. But it's more than just the printer. It's more than just the design decisions. It goes beyond that. It goes into the business models that are behind those design decisions. And that's where I think the real villain lies. When we're thinking about how we design new technologies, we really need to radically change the way we think about the business models that are behind those technologies. So it's not enough to just put like a Band-Aid over the problem and just say, oh, we'll put it out and just hope that it's going to work. We have to rethink our business models. And that means we have to put not just people at the center, but anyone who might experience a barrier or a challenge accessing or using our products or services. They need to go at the center. So it's what I call extreme users. Those users who experience the most challenges, we have to put them at the center of the design process. So not people like me, but people who, like my mom, will experience problems using technology. Now, if we can make it work for my mom, it'll work better for me. It'll work better for you. It'll work better for everyone.
Very interesting. So time for 2 more questions for you. My next question is, how do you approach gender inclusivity, specifically in the context of innovation?
Yeah, so I think gender inclusion is really it's one of the most prescient problems in the innovation space. And the reason isn't just because we need gender balance or we need more women. We do need representation, absolutely. And we need underrepresented communities, including women, in our leadership positions. But it goes beyond that. It really looks into what is the whole person that's behind the inclusion, role, the role of inclusion and role of diversity. So I'll give you another story. One of my former PhD students is a woman named Anita from Costa Rica. She's a mother of a young daughter, a beautiful young daughter, and has a husband, and she was living in Costa Rica. She got a PhD position here in Norway to work with me on a project that she knew was going to change the game for not only her career, but going to create a better world for her daughter. So it was a really important, the stakes for her were really high. Now she's moving to Norway in the middle of the summer or middle of winter from Costa Rica. So as you can imagine, not only the culture shock, but the weather shock was significant. And I, at the time, was going through a very difficult period at work. I was stressed out, and it was the end of the year, and all I wanted to do was go on vacation, get away from everything. So I was already disconnected when she had arrived. Now, when she arrived, she was experiencing some challenges. She had a hard time finding a school for her daughter. She had a hard time finding housing. She was having struggles at work, just getting established into the systems of the university. And every time she would email me and say, hey, Anthony, I need your help. Hey, can you take a look at this? Hey, I'm struggling with this. I just kind of dismissed her. I didn't really acknowledge. I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, it'll work out. Don't worry. It's fine. You'll be okay. We'll deal with it next year. Not realizing that her experience as an immigrant was massively different than my experience as an American man moving to Norway. So I think when it comes to issues around gender, we have to go beyond just one dimension, and we have to look at all the dimensions of who that person is. And someone like Anita isn't just a woman. She's a woman of color from Costa Rica. She's a mother, and she's a woman of faith. So the Christian religion was really important for her. So at the end of the year, her whole mind is set on celebrating the Christmas holiday with her family. And so having her heart so invested in this, and me not realizing how important this was to her, was a real problem, and it created a real challenge in our relationship. So I think when it comes to issues around gender, when it comes to underrepresentation, we have to think beyond just one dimension, and we have to look at people, the whole spectrum of their identity. So we have to see the spectrum.
Amazing. Thank you. And my last question for you, Anthony, and this is, what emerging trends do you foresee in the field of inclusive leadership?
I think one of the biggest things that we're going to have to cope with is around artificial intelligence. This is a field that I know, or we all know, has been making huge headlines in the news. And it's not new necessarily in that, artificial intelligence or the technologies behind it have been around for some time. But it's new in the sense of how we're seeing it in the lives of everyday people. And I think we need to get on in a new mindset into how we create these technologies, because a lot of them are being created by people who, to not put a fine point on it, people like me, middle-aged white men from the global north who are just creating technologies in their own image without the foresight and insight that someone who has a different background might be able to bring to the table. And this is really problematic, because what we're going to do is we're going to be replicating a lot of the inequities, a lot of the lack of diversity issues, the lack of exclusion or inclusion, the exclusion issues that we have here in society. And one of the reasons is we're not looking at our workforce in a way that values difference. So I had a student once, a student named Laura. She was an absolute brilliant mathematician and software engineer, and she studied artificial intelligence in her bachelor's and in her master's degree. She was absolutely switched on. She also was a woman with autism. So when she got out of her university degree, she wanted to apply for all these different jobs, but she needed accommodation. She needed support. She needed a workplace that would be flexible to her needs as a woman with autism. And every interview she went on, she just got nothing in return. And eventually she called me, and she was so excited because she had gotten a job as a forklift operator.
Wow.
And this is what I'm getting at. this person is underemployed to the highest degree. She had so much talent, so much potential. And while she was gloriously happy getting a job as a forklift operator, this, in my opinion, isn't her potential. Her potential could have been so much better served if our workplaces were able to accommodate people who have differences, who have disabilities, and who have different experiences.
Well said. Anthony, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. Thank you for talking to me about so many different aspects of inclusion, about inclusive leadership. And thank you for such incredible stories that you have shared with me on virtually every question that I asked. Thank you again. And good luck. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.